Hello guys, and welcome to the last plan with me video of this year. I know so many of you must feel the same way, that this year has really just flown by. But anyway, let's at least try to take out whatever is left of this year before turning our gaze forward. I filmed this video a bit earlier than usual, so my November theme is like half done here, but I'll share the final flip through on my Instagram as I always do. But then when we reach the next empty page, we can start to set up this December ethereal Christmas inspired theme. I always struggle to come up with December setups because I'm just not a huge fan of the traditional Christmas doodles, and I know not everyone here even celebrates Christmas for that matter, but this time I think I managed to come up with something that kinda checks that box, but it's still pretty different than what you'd expect. But yeah, I'm gonna start here with a full spread size watercolor painting. I'm using my Winsor & Newton cold press watercolor paper, my trusty watercolor set, then a white gouache paint and a white marker, and then two, but mainly only one of these pearl paints that you could replace with shimmery pens, some glitter, or even a foil paper. My goal was to keep this monthly setup maybe a bit more simple, because I know my past few themes have been pretty out there and complicated, and they always take me a while to film as well. So this month I just needed something a bit easier to balance things out, but I hope you'll still like this month nevertheless. But yeah, I started this by very generally adding some pencil guidelines for myself. I think this painting doesn't really need much sketching, but there were a few things that are maybe good to mark down, so you know that the placements kind of make sense in the overall picture. But after that, I just went right in with the watercolors. I started with a wet on wet technique on the sky part. So I wet the whole sky first, which is clean water, and then started to slowly add the colors that will now blend very seamlessly into each other. My color story this month is this very soft, almost brownish gray, mixed with these white and light warm tones, and then topped with the bronze foil paint that we're gonna add later. I know this is maybe not the first holiday color palette that you would think, but I thought it suited the theme surprisingly well in the end. I always feel like it's very difficult in the beginning of the painting to know how dark you want to take the colors, so I kept things pretty light here in this point. It might help to swatch out the colors beforehand like I did, or just have some reference pictures or a color palette that you can check every once in a while. But now that you've created some initial background washes with a few different tones, I actually sprinkled some of that white gouache paint on the sky. We'll add a lot more stars and snowflakes on the sky later as well, so these will just be the very first ones, and you can create sprinkles like these very easily by dipping your brush in the white paint, then in water, and then you can just hit the brush with something so that the paint kind of flies everywhere. After that, I took the same white paint and started to define this moon on the sky. I think the gouache paint mixed with the watercolors created a super nice kind of dreamy look that really suited this soft wintry landscape. I spread some of that white paint also to the sky to create these cloud-like shapes, but still kept everything super loose and messy again. In this point, the background had fully dried, so I started to paint these trees that will cover the whole lower part of this painting. I really encourage you to mix some different shades here. So you can see some of the trees here have a bit more brown tone, and then some lean more towards green. I also kept the trees in the front line the darkest and made them gradually lighter when I was moving further away. As you can see, you really don't need to be specific and detailed with the trees, because we're gonna cover them up with white snow later, so just creating some messy triangle shapes will do the job just fine. Before starting with the snow, however, I quickly jumped back to the sky to add color to this Santa's sleigh. I used my tiniest watercolor brush, and really the details don't matter that much again. I know the reindeers might be a bit difficult to paint, but if you manage to get them somewhat in the right direction, I promise you they'll look just fine from the distance. But yeah, then I took out my Uniposca white marker, which is a perfect pen to use to add any white details to your paintings. So I started to cover the trees with it to create this snowy appearance. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, and you can get so far with just some random dots and scribbles. Then lastly, I moved back to the sky and started to add just a crazy amount of dots and stars with the same white pen, and also with my 2 pearl paints. I mainly ended up using the darker one because I liked how the almost rose gold tone went together with the rest of these colors. And to be completely honest, in this point, I thought I had completely ruined this painting because the dots stood out from the sky a bit more than I liked. So I tried all kinds of things here to save everything, like adding a light wash of that bronze to the sky and closer to the tree. Then I add more white details and so on. I wasn't super happy about this painting in this point, but decided to add it to my notebook anyway and see if the final details would somehow save it. So next I added the December monthly title to the sky, and I think that alone did a lot to give a final touch to this painting. Then I still spent a good while just adding even more dots and stars everywhere. You know, I often think that less is more, but I think this time more was definitely more. And I started to be happier with the end result the more I kept just working with the sky and the background. So yeah, I just wanted to share that honest experience. I know we all have those moments, and sometimes when you just keep working with the painting, there is still a chance for you to save it or at least change it for a little bit better. But anyway, now it's time to move on, and next we're gonna set up the December monthly spread. I wanted the look of these pages to match the previous painting, so we are creating this misty look to the top part of this whole thing. Even if this looks complicated to you, this kind of look is actually super easy to achieve, and this time we are also adding the colors directly to the notebook paper, so you don't even need any special watercolor paper or anything like that. I started by securing the calendar area with some washi tape so we can protect that area and have a clean line here later. And then I just started to add these very messy layers with watercolors using very similar tones than we did this far. You'll probably need to work quite fast, and it's also quite difficult to blend the colors together on the notebook paper, but it actually doesn't really matter here because we are not even trying to create super blended clean look or anything like that. Adding some clips to the corners might help to keep the paper from wrinkling too much, and it's also better to let the whole background fully dry in this point before we move on. But after everything had dried, I took the same white pen and bronze paint and started to add all kinds of stars, dots, and sparkles to the top. I drew these hanging things from the top of the page and thought it added a cute detail to this page. Again, the foil paint is definitely not required here, but it does add a very beautiful effect to the pages when you turn them around. And then I also wrote the December title here on the first side before adding the same dots and sparkles to the next one. I saw this funny Christmassy quote somewhere and thought I would write it here on the second page. So I made these white background boxes and then wrote this one that says, "Merry everything and a happy always." But now it was finally time to remove the tapes and reveal our clean calendar area. My paper actually ripped a little bit here when I was removing the tape, but luckily nothing major happened and I could cover it up pretty well. I decided to go with these individual daily boxes this month because I thought somehow this look reminded me of a Christmas advent calendar. There's also room on the side for a bigger box that I decided to dedicate for my Instagram content list, but if there's something else you would find more beneficial, feel free to change it up. In the end, I thought the bottom of this page looked a little bit empty. I think it would have been smart to lower the calendar a little bit, but I decided to let it be this time and just move on to the next spread that I was already super excited to set up. But before we start with this planning spread, however, let's take just a quick moment to thank this month's sponsor, who's our trusty Skillshare. For those of you who still don't know them or need a reminder, Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring online classes for creative people on topics like illustrations, fine arts, graphic design, and so much more. I'm sure many of you would be interested in this class I recently took called Illustrated Lettering, Drawing Intricate Flower Forms, which is taught by an illustrator, Gemma O'Brien. I've been trying to improve my flower illustrations, and this was such a detailed class with so many good advices, not to mention that an illustration like this would be absolutely perfect for a bullet journal. The classes in Skillshare are meant for learning, so they are completely ad-free, and with an annual subscription, it's less than $10 per month. However, Skillshare is now offering the first 1,000 of my subscribers who use the link in the description a free trial of their premium membership. All the information is in the description as well, and once again, thank you so much for Skillshare for continuing to support my channel. I'm always so happy and grateful to work with them, but now it's time to move on to set up this next spread. So I started with this left page that will be for the monthly planning. I always love pages like these because they are so helpful for gathering your thoughts and setting the focus for the month. Sometimes I feel like it's very easy to take too much on your plate, so narrowing down your monthly plans only to a few specific things might be super helpful. I felt like I needed most of the space in this page, so I just drew this swirl divider here to add a simple decoration element without using too much space. I also used this Zig brush pen for the title backgrounds because this color happened to go really well with the rest of the monthly colors. But these pens are always a bit tricky to use for this purpose since the tip is really flimsy, so the lines here probably weren't as clean as they could have been. I also started to struggle with my white pens at this point, so you'll see me switching between my Uni Posca and the Uniball gel pen for the rest of this theme actually. And you'll see later that I eventually gave up on both of them because they were really testing me this month. But anyway, let's now move on to the more exciting page. And I felt like since this is the last month of the year, we needed space for some yearly reviewing as well. I know this year has been pretty crazy and difficult for many of us, so I had this idea to write a message for the past year, and maybe it might help you to maybe at least emotionally letting go of it a little bit. I think then it might be easier to look forward as well. I messed up with the spacing of the title here, by the way, so I was struggling a little bit here to change it up. You might need this whole page for this message thing, honestly, and maybe you can even continue your rant on the next one or on a different journal. That's probably what I'm gonna do, but since I wanted this spread to look a little bit prettier, I still decided to cover the lower part with this Christmassy drawing. So I started by drawing this baby deer. I tried to think of something I haven't previously drawn on my channel and decided to go with this. So we are starting with a pencil sketch as always, and just spend as much time here as you need. Deer have pretty long and skinny legs, so for the baby version, the legs felt extra long for the body. But I really recommend finding some reference pictures that you can use to capture all the measurements correctly. I kept this drawing pretty simple, so I'm not even trying to capture all the fur details and so on. I just mainly focused on the outlines and then added some light shading with the colors. So after the pencil sketch was good enough, I started to color this with my watercolors. You could use your brush pens as well to create a very similar end result, but watercolors are just a bit more easy and straightforward, which is why I nowadays often go with them instead. So I added some light brown layers first and tried to also add some of that purple tone to the browns so that this drawing wouldn't stand out too much from the rest of the theme colors. Then I darkened the back, the tail, the back of the neck, and also some other areas that needed some shading. Again, using a picture of a real animal in somewhat similar posture will really help you out to target those shadowy areas. But after these simple layers, I added just a little bit definition with my thin 005 micron pen, and I also used this to color the eye and some other parts that needed some darker color. Then the final step was to add some of those white dots to this little guy's fur, and I also added some of this white to other areas as well that I accidentally colored too dark. So that's it for this simple deer drawing, and now let's add this Christmas tree here to bring that holiday look to this spread as well. So for this, I wanted to try out using my gouache paints instead of the watercolors because I wanted to try out this kind of messy layering technique. So I mixed some colors here on my palette. I'm using some grayish brown and green tones again, and then just started to tap the colors to the page, mimicking this evergreen shape. I tried my best to not keep this too symmetrical, so you want some branches a bit lower and maybe a bit further away than the others, and I think that adds a more realistic look for your tree. I started with this kind of medium based color, and after that started to add some darker tones in here to add some deeper shadows. And I also mixed some green and even purple to add some color variation. Then I also mixed together some lighter tones that I started to add to the highlight points in a very similar way actually that we did in the cover page painting with the evergreens. Again, adding some variation will help to keep everything more realistic, and these fast dotting motions will do just fine. I also added a tiny bit of white to some of the areas to create even brighter highlights. But then lastly, I finished this tree with some of those bronze ornaments again, but you almost can't really see them in the video. In person, I think it just added the final Christmas look to this spread. After the drawing was done, I still drew a quick border around this page. Actually, now looking back, I don't know if it was necessary, but at least it gave me an opportunity to kind of connect these decorations to this world divider on the previous page. But after that, it finally finished this whole monthly planning spread, and now we can move on to the last few pages of this month. So next it's time for our first weekly setup, and once again I packed this spread with all kinds of planning and tracking stuff because these are the pages I use most of my time throughout the month. I started with a quick calendar to get a visual reminder of where we are going, and then under it I set up my usual habit tracker. You could easily modify this and change the number of habits you're tracking, and I often end up using these small symbols to indicate my monthly habits. I also left a little bit bigger section to track my daily sleep, and I think I'll try to pay more attention to when I went to sleep as well this month. I often just track the hours, but I've noticed that having a consistent sleeping rhythm is actually way more beneficial. But yeah, then towards the bottom I added my weekly meal planning section, which is just so helpful in the daily life. I always plan the lunch and dinner, and the breakfast pretty much stays the same for us, so I don't usually include it here. But after that's done, let's move on to the next page, where I started to set up this a bit different weekday layout. I used these square boxes and then added some similar watercolor mist here that we already used in this monthly theme. I know the daily boxes are quite small here, but I'm trying really hard to narrow down my daily to-do list to only a few most important things. So what a better way to force yourself to do that than giving yourself very limited space to write anything down. To top the watercolor splashes here, I added some similar stars and dot decorations, and then I also went ahead and added some of those colors also behind the habit and meal titles on the previous page. Then, since there was still a bit of room left, I decided to use the bottom part of this page for a weekly diary section. I'm honestly a little bit afraid that this is gonna be too much for me to set up every week this month, so I might end up changing this layout for something more simple. But anyway, let's move on, and you can see me leaving the next few pages empty, and those will be for the rest of the weeks in December. And then I finally set up the last spread of this month and of this year, oh my god, which is of course the review spread. So I actually started from the decorations on this spread, so I decided to draw these big swirl things from the top and then added some Christmas ornaments hanging from them. You could even add some more ornaments and change up the shapes to something more fun, but I just went with some basic circles. I don't know about you guys, but I always struggle so much to make my lines straight, so these whirls turned maybe a bit crooked, but whose doesn't honestly? I'm sure many of you can relate to this problem at home. I used a thicker pen here as well to add some variation to the lines. And then I just ended up painting the hanging ornaments with the same bronze paint. I think the video managed to perfectly capture the effect in this shot, so you can really see how pretty it looks when the light hits this paint. But after adding some final details to these decorations, I started to work with the actual content of this page. So I know many of you might want to do some yearly reviewing here, since you'll probably fill this page towards the end of the year. So for that reason, I kind of left all of these sections on this first page quite open, so they would work for just December monthly reviewing or to review the whole year. By the way, here you can see how I finally gave up with my white pens because neither of them worked and it was just too frustrating to deal with that in this point of the setup. But anyway, let's move on. And I actually wanted the next page to be more focused on the whole year. I personally always like to spend some time reviewing my yearly goals, you know, maybe what has changed, where I am now compared to the start of 2020. So I think a section like this might be very helpful, especially before jumping to your new bullet journal setup and setting up the goals for 2021. I had so many goals that just aren't relevant or interesting to me anymore, and that's okay. Times change, your path in life evolves, and it's perfectly fine to just toss out some things that just didn't work out the way you imagined. And then as the final thing, I wanted to leave everything on a positive note, and this final section will be all about the achievements of this year. But that finally finishes up this December layout. I really hope you guys liked it and find it useful. And as for the December videos, I'll of course post my yearly flip through and also the 2021 setup. I tried to get both of those out before the holidays, and then the January setup will probably fall somewhere around there. I'm also working on a super big update to my shop that you'll probably know more about this week actually. So if you're interested, keep an eye on that. But yeah, anyways, I just want to thank all of you so much for sharing this year with me. I'm just so grateful to have this amazing community here. You guys are always so sweet, and I'm super looking forward to continue to make these videos also next year. But I think that's finally it for today. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!